What's up, ladies and gents? It's Jeff Benjamin with iDownload Blog. I want to show you a new application called Castro. This is a new podcasting app for iOS. And I know you're probably thinking to yourself, Jeff, we already have a plethora of podcasting apps. Why do we need another one? Well, you probably don't need another one, but this one is really good because it plays off of iOS's strengths, and it really is designed from the ground up with iOS 7 in mind. The big thing here is that content really is king. All the content is basically front and center, so you can easily access it and just get to the meat of the matter. Play your podcast. Searching is easy. Just as you saw there, I searched for Let's Talk iOS, and it found it. And you can see as you can scroll through this list of all the episodes, you can go back using just a swipe back gesture. You can subscribe using the little plus button to the right of the podcast name. And as I was stating, it's all about the content. Well, that and gestures, because gestures play a huge role here in Castro, and pretty much everything is done with gestures besides a few taps here and there. Most of the activity on this podcast app is controlled using gestures. Another thing you'll notice here is that the settings are pretty sparse. There's not a lot of settings here to just get confused by, not a lot of configuration. There are basically 4 settings right in the main section for each podcast: subscribe, auto download, news mode, and playback speed. And that's pretty much it. And I like that actually, because the whole purpose of a podcasting app is to allow you to easily listen to your favorite podcasts. And that's what I appreciate about Castro, because everything else just kind of steps aside and allows the content to speak for itself. So what does that mean? Well, that means that show notes like you see here are presented in a way that is easy to read, easy to access. You tap a link and it does exactly what you would expect it to do. It goes to Safari, opens that link, and you can easily read all the content. It has nice fonts, and also notice that the background is tinted to match the color of the podcast cover, the album cover. So that's a nice effect. It's been done in other apps, obviously, but I think Castro does it quite well. Now, the big thing here with Castro is controlling your podcast, and that is done using the transport controls at the bottom of the screen. In fact, if you tap and hold the play button, you'll bring up this playback speed menu that allows you to switch the speeds of the playback, so you can switch between slowest or fastest or slow or normal or fast. And you can also speed up your progression throughout the podcast by using a tap and hold gesture on the forward and back buttons, just like that. Now, the best thing about Castro's transport controls at the bottom of the screen are the scrubbing gestures. And that is easily done. All you do is you literally just tap on the bottom of the screen and drag your finger just like that to scrub throughout the podcast. So you can just literally drag your finger and get to a precision point courtesy of that timestamp. And notice the playhead, how the time goes to the right of the playhead when you get to the left of the screen, because otherwise your time would be cut off. You couldn't read it anymore. So that's just good design. They've got all the subtle details worked out. And while some of the other podcast apps do a fairly good job of the scrubbing feature, I think Castro scrubbing is by far the best scrubbing that you'll find in any iOS app for that matter. So that is one of the features I think is really, really well done. And it just makes getting to that precision, that precise point in a podcast much easier than before. Now, if you're one of those people who doesn't necessarily like to download their podcast, you prefer to stream your podcast, then yes, you can do that within Castro very easily, I might add. All you need to do is just find the podcast episode you want to play and then just hit play for streaming. If it's not downloaded, you'll see a streaming button. You can scrub through just like normal with the streaming, and it works just like it does when you've downloaded the episode. Obviously, the benefit of downloading, just like we're doing right now, is that you can have it for offline playback. You don't necessarily have to be online, and you can have it set up to auto download new episodes for you when you subscribe to those podcasts, and they'll be waiting and ready for you whenever you leave the house. So that is one of the best things about iOS 7 in general, is that you can now do background downloads. It'll automatically pull in those new episodes for you. Now, to illustrate some other features in Castro, I'm going to download another podcast. How about Twit, This Week in Tech? And let's see here. So I'll just go ahead and subscribe to this podcast by hitting the subscribe button, as I've done there. And now you should see it automatically start to download the first episode, the latest episode. If you go to your episodes tab, you'll see it show up, and you see the little cloud icon. That indicates it's not currently stored locally on your device, but you can see it's starting to download, and the download is progressing as we speak. So it's pulling in that first episode for you automatically, and any new episodes to come will automatically be pushed to your device or pulled in from the server to your device. And if you have it set up, you'll get a push notification telling you, hey, this new episode of This Week in Tech is ready and waiting for you. And there's one of the notifications there at the top inside the app. And we are ready to listen to This Week in Tech. And there is Let's Talk iOS. It is ready and waiting, so we can just go ahead and play that if we want to. Or if you decide, hey, I don't actually want this file on my device, just hit delete and then delete the file like that. It'll free up any space that it was taking up, and you can always still stream it. Now, if you want to delete a particular episode or mark an episode as being played, you can use a swipe gesture right on the episodes tab. If you swipe to the right, you can delete. Swipe to the left, you can mark it as played. Now, notice here on the This Week in Tech podcast page, and notice how the background, the links, and the colors of the buttons accentuate the podcast background image, the cover for the podcast. So that, again, as I mentioned earlier, is one of the nicer features of Castro. That way you get a sort of a customized look for every podcast in your playlist. And I'm going to add another subscription here just to emphasize this here. So let's add Quit, because I know they have a red cover, and that's going to be brought out really nicely on the podcast page for Quit. So once we subscribe and then we go back to the main podcast page for Quit right here, and you'll see it pull it all in. You notice the button, the settings button is red, and you got the blurring, you got the background, and you see how that looks quite a bit different than the Let's Talk iOS or the This Week in Tech podcast, just like that. So that is one of the, like I said, one of the nicer features of this. Obviously, this isn't the first app to do that, but I just wanted to bring this out to you so you could see some of the differences between Castro and some of the other podcast apps out there. So you can find Castro on the App Store for $2.99. It's an introductory price. Again, this app has a gesture-based interface, episodes tab to allow you to find all your episodes, full screen themes, has iOS 7 backgrounding, automatic downloads, news mode to only keep the most recent podcasts, great search as you saw, a simple, well thought out, just straightforward podcast app. Doesn't give you tons of options and stuff like that to confuse you, but there are some options you'll find in the settings app for checking for new episodes, episode size limits, etc., cache size. But you're not going to be inundated with tons of options that just really don't matter when it comes down to listening to your favorite personalities and podcasts. So again, this has been a overview, sort of a review, I guess you could say, of Castro, a new podcasting app for iOS. It's $2.99 on the App Store. Folks, let me know what you guys think about Castro in the comment section below. This is Jeff with iDownload Blog.